Hey everybody. So today talking about Act 3 of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Act 3 is the longest act in the play and a lot happens. It probably has more plot than any other act in the play. So I can't really cover everything that happens in it in a video of reasonable size. So, read it for yourself. Again, a lot happens. It's an entertaining act of the play. But I want to focus on a few key passages, kind of focused on four characters who I think are kind of the most important characters in the act. The first character I want to look at is Bottom, who Act 3 begins with Bottom and all the other rude mechanicals have joined together out in the woods to practice their play. The play that they're doing is a tragedy called Pyramus and Thisbe. Its plot somewhat resembles Romeo and Juliet. It's sort of a star-crossed lovers tragedy. And as they're planning the play and talking about it, Bottom immediately expresses a worry, and his worry, and this is right at the very beginning of Act 3, Scene 1, he says, "There are things in this comedy of Pyramus and Thisbe that will never please. First, Pyramus must draw a sword to kill himself, which the ladies cannot abide. How answer you that?" And everyone agrees with Bottom that this is a significant thing to be worried about. That whenever someone in the play pretends to kill themselves up on stage, that everyone in the audience will freak out because they're going to think, oh my god, I just saw somebody kill themselves. What's revealed almost immediately is that Bottom fundamentally just does not understand how plays work, or really how stories work in general. Specifically, the concept that Bottom seems not to understand is what's called the willing suspension of disbelief, which is a concept that a poet named Samuel Taylor Coleridge came up with, where basically the idea is that when we watch a play or read a book or watch a movie or really encounter any fictional story, like, we know that it's not real, but we sort of willingly turn off or suspend the part of our brains that disbelieves the thing that we know isn't real, so whatever. If you're watching, Harry Potter, you know that there aren't really wizards and magic, but while you're watching the story, you accept that there are, and you sort of go along with it. Bottom does not seem to realize that people do that. He's worried that if they, pretend to stab themselves, that everyone's going to say, oh my god, that guy stabbed himself. So they're worried about it, and Bottom's solution is, he says, "I have a device to make all well. Write me a prologue. And let the prologue seem to say we will do no harm with our swords, and that Pyramus is not killed indeed. And for the better assurance, tell them that I, Pyramus, am not Pyramus, but Bottom the Weaver. This will put them out of fear." To be clear, Bottom's proposal here is that he's going to stand up at the beginning of the play and say, "Hey everybody, I'm going to be playing this character named Pyramus, but that's not actually who I am. I'm Bottom the Weaver." I mean, it would be like if Daniel Radcliffe stood up at the beginning of the Harry Potter movies and said, "Hey everybody, I'm not actually a wizard." It would kind of mess up the movie. I mean, we know that he's not actually a wizard, but we sort of need on some level to be able to let ourselves believe it. So Shakespeare has a lot of fun with the idea that the rude mechanicals sort of just don't understand how plays work. And as they go on rehearsing their plays, I mean, there's a lot that it seems like it's going to be quite bad. And Puck happens upon them and sees that what's going on is a really bad play. And basically, Puck being Puck, he decides to mess with them. And specifically, when Bottom has left the area for a moment to practice, Puck, it's not entirely clear what he does. The way that he describes it later is he said, "I fixed an ass's knoll on his head," an ass's knoll being like the head of a donkey. it's unclear whether that means that Puck, like, transformed Bottom's head into a donkey head using magic, or if it means that he, like, put something sort of like a Mow the Mule head on top of Bottom's head and sort of glued it down or something. Um, I mean, obviously, when you stage the play, a director gets a choice of how this is going to look. But in any event, all of a sudden, Bottom has a donkey head. All of his friends freak out and run away. Bottom is left alone in the woods. And lo and behold, perhaps you've forgotten, but Shakespeare hasn't, that Titania has fallen asleep in the woods and had the magical love potion put on her eyes. So she wakes up, boom, immediately falls in love with Bottom, and that becomes her plot line. Bottom finds the whole thing strange, but he sort of goes with it. He says at one point, to say the truth, reason and love keep little company together nowadays. One of the moments where the character almost sort of seems to speak the slogan of the play. And so Bottom gets led away by Titania because now he's going to sort of be her lover. And so they go off stage. So Puck, having done this, goes on to do other things. Indeed, Puck drives most of the action in Act 3. He turns Bottom into a donkey man, and thus, by indirection, causes Titania to fall in love with him. He ends up putting the love potion on Demetrius to cause him to fall in love with Helena, which creates a big fight with them. He breaks up a fight between Demetrius and Lysander at the end of the act. Basically, everything that happens in Act 3 has Puck's fingerprints on it. And, he's enjoying himself. In one of the more famous lines in the play, this is line 114, in Act 3, Scene 2, Puck says, "Lord, what fools these mortals be." In Puck's mind, we mortal humans are just sort of Puck's playthings for him to mess around with. And he has a great deal of fun doing it. There's a kind of marvelous speech where the speech that, in line 17 of Act 3, Scene 2, that begins with Puck telling Oberon, "An ass's knoll, I fix it on his head," describing what he did to Bottom. And then, goes on and describes the rude mechanicals all freaking out and running away in this really kind of grand, elaborate metaphor that's a metaphor for birds flying away from a hunter, right? "So at his sight away his fellows fly." Previously rising and clawing at the gun's report, sever themselves and madly sweep the sky. If you've ever seen birds get scared up by a hunting dog or something, it's a really kind of marvelous description of that. Conversation with Oberon, they witness Demetrius and Hermia, and specifically realize that, A, that Lysander's not around, and B, that Demetrius, who is supposed to be in love with Helena if Puck had done his job correctly, instead Demetrius is still pursuing Hermia. And indeed, Hermia is quite freaked out. Hermia thinks that Demetrius has killed Lysander because, last time that she saw Lysander, they were being all lovey-dovey and he went to sleep, and then she woke up and he wasn't there. Oberon's quite angry at Puck about this. Like, why did you put the love potion on the wrong person? Right, as Oberon puts it in line 91, there's some true love turned and not a false turn true. That, Lysander had the true love, but you've turned it by putting the potion on him, and did not take Demetrius's false love and turn it to true love for Helena. And Puck's response here, it's a complicated couplet, lines 92 and 93, but it's important, and it's, I think, a window into how Puck views the world. Puck, right, so again, the accusation is you've screwed up, you've caused true love to turn false. And Puck says, "Then fate overrules, that one man holding troth, a million fail, confounding oath on oath." All right. So taking this bit by bit, when he says fate overrules, he's basically saying, well, luck happened. things happen the way that they're supposed to happen, and basically, like, fate intervened. And basically Puck's saying that fate intervened and made happen what was going to happen anyway, because, right, and that when he says then fate overrules that, that basically means because. And he says one man holding troth. Right, to hold troth is to, like, keep your promise, keep your vow. Troth is the root word of betrothed, as in, like, engaged to be married. So to hold your troth is to, like, keep your vows, particularly your marriage vows. He says, one man holding troth, a million fail, confounding oath on oath. But basically what he's saying here is only one man in a million is actually going to be faithful in his relationships. And a million other people are going to fail and constantly, confound, as in sort of like mess up one oath after another. We're all just going to make promises that we never keep, according to Puck. So basically he's saying, yeah, okay, this Lysander kid, he abandoned his fiancée or whatever, but, like, he was going to break his promises to her eventually. So really, I just kind of sped things along. That's basically Puck's argument here. That, we're fools and we're unfaithful. And so it's not Puck's fault. Oberon doesn't really agree with this, but he always seems to be sort of amused by Puck, so he lets it go. The other characters I want to focus on in Act 3 are Hermia and Helena. And very shortly after the Puck-Oberon scene, where basically Oberon gives Puck orders, like, you've got to, get Lysander back in love with the person that he's supposed to be in love with, and you've got to get Demetrius in love with Helena. First, we see a scene with Lysander and Helena, where Helena's angry at Lysander. She was angry before. She thinks that Lysander's playing a prank on her by pretending to be into her, since he was never into her before and was engaged to Helena's best friend. Lysander is insisting that he's telling the truth, and this is line 126, or a little bit before that. He says, look when I vow, right? He's vowing that he loves Helena. Look when I vow, I weep, and vows so born, in their nativity all truth appears. How can these things in me seem scorn to you, bearing the badge of faith to prove them true? To be clear, the badge of faith is tears, right? Like he says, when I vow, I weep, and that in their nativity, all truth appears. Nativity meaning birth. That basically it's like he's birthing tears out of his eyes, and these are the symbols that he's telling the truth. For the record, this is a really spurious claim that somehow if you cry when you say something, it's obviously the truth. But that's the argument that Lysander makes. And Helena wants nothing to do with it, right? She says, you're making these vows. Well, these vows are Hermia's. Will you give her over? Weigh oath to oath, and you will nothing weigh. Your vows to her and me put into scales will even weigh, and both as light as tails. The scales that she means there are like the legal scales. And basically she's saying you made vows to Hermia, now you're making vows to me. You could put your vows to each of us on this scale, and the scale wouldn't even move because none of your vows mean anything. Again, here we have one of these kind of grand Shakespearean metaphors. So she's angry at Lysander, but soon thereafter, she's angry at Demetrius, because Demetrius is asleep here. And, right, because Puck has, put the potion on Demetrius to try to fix things and get him to fall in love with Helena. So Demetrius wakes up. O Helen, goddess nymph, perfect divine, to what, my love, shall I compare thine eyne? Crystal is muddy, oh, how ripe and show thy lips, those kissing cherries tempting grow. It keeps going here. It's worth noting that as soon as Demetrius gets hit with the love potion, he's really poetic for the first time in the play. But Helena wants nothing to do with it. Her immediate conclusion in the next big speech that she gives is that all three of the other young lovers are basically playing a practical joke on her. that the two guys are both pretending to be in love with her just to make fun of her. And indeed, she quickly decides that Hermia is involved too. Whenever Hermia shows up, about a page later, starting at line 192, Helena says, "Oh, she is one of this confederacy." Like they're all working together. "Now I perceive they have conjoined all three to fashion this false sport in spite of me." And in the midst of all the kind of wildness of this scene, Helena proceeds to give one of the most moving speeches in all of Shakespeare. Beginning at line 198, she talks to Hermia about how betrayed she feels by Hermia because she thinks that Hermia is playing a prank on her, where she sort of like talks about how close they were when they were young. And I won't go through the whole speech, but you should read it. She talks about their sisters' vows, the hours that we've spent, school days friendship, childhood innocence. She lays out this image of the two of them, like, sewing on the same sewing pattern, like sitting on a cushion together when they were little girls. And like growing up together, so we grew together like to a double cherry seeming parted, but yet a union in partition, two lovely berries molded on one stem. It feels like we've always been so close, and now we're split. And again, I think this is kind of part of what makes this play so much fun. Is, I mean, who can't relate to that on some level? That I think we all probably carry some memory of, some childhood friend betraying us at some point, and like how deep that cuts. And yeah, Helena's speech gets at that. That said, while that speech is quite serious, soon thereafter things get kind of wild and frankly a little bit comical. And specifically, right, I mean, we have this situation where Demetrius and Lysander are both expressing ever greater degrees of their love for Helena, even to the point, they want Hermia to go away. They kind of vaguely threaten violence to Hermia. They threaten violence to each other. And eventually, Hermia and Helena really start insulting each other. And 282, it really gets rolling. There's this moment right before line 282 where Lysander finally convinces Hermia, like, "Look, I'm in love with Helena. I'm not in love with you." And Hermia turns to Helena. I mean, it's interesting, right? At the moment where she decides that her boyfriend is into a different girl, she doesn't get mad at her boyfriend. She gets mad at the girl and says to Helena, "Oh me, you juggler, you canker blossom, you thief of love." It eventually, it gets further. Helena makes a comment. She calls Hermia a puppet, which I think Helena's intent in the insult is that she's saying that Hermia is like a puppet that the guys are controlling. But Hermia interprets it as a joke about the fact that Hermia is shorter than Helena. And, she's like, "Puppet, she hath urged her height, and with her personage, her tall personage, her height, forsooth, she hath prevailed with him." Basically, Hermia is worried that Helena, that Lysander's developed an interest in tall girls. And so that's how Helena won him over. But Hermia keeps going, "Are you grown so high in his esteem because I am so dwarfish and low? How low am I, thou painted maypole? Speak, how low am I? I am not so low but that my nails can reach unto thy eyes." So, yeah, she's threatening to scratch Helena's eyes out. When she compares her to a maypole, that's, it was a pole that, like, the English used for these sort of, like, spring dances where you would dance around a pole with streamers. So basically the joke is that Helena is tall, but also that Helena's really skinny. And when she calls her a painted maypole, there's probably even like an implication that maybe Helena's wearing too much makeup. So Hermia really lays into her. Helena begins to sort of beg for help at this point because Hermia said that she's going to scratch Helena's eyes out. So Helena's sort of turning to the guys and says to her one of the more famous lines in the play, 323, "Oh, when she is angry, she is keen and shrewd. She was a vixen when she went to school." and though she be but little, she is fierce. The record, if you want to like buy a onesie that says though she be but little, she is fierce, Etsy will be more than happy to hook you up. So anyway, yeah, I mean, Act 3 kind of builds to this moment where the two women are insulting each other, the two guys are ready to fight with each other. Puck kind of has to lead Lysander and Demetrius on this wild goose chase to keep them from beating each other up or worse, and also to get the sort of love potions straightened out, which he's trying to do at the end of the act. So at the end of Act 3, yeah, we got everybody in the woods. People are in love with all kinds of crazy random people. Stuff gets weird in the woods. And yeah, I mean, Act 3 is sort of where the play goes nuts. So read around with it, enjoy it. It's a good time.